aware of in our area, Democrat and Republican, supports this legislation. Safety is an issue, but so is overreaching by our friends at the Corps. Occasionally they're a little bit tone deaf, especially if they get transferred in and out a little bit too quickly. This is an amazing little way to fish here below the dams. Some of you not realizing that you think a fish is this big or so. Some of these fish are 30 and 40 pounds. This is a magnificent recreational resource that has been unfairly harmed by proposed Corps actions and by really an official who will be soon moving away from our area and living in another part of the country. He's a fine gentleman, but this is an opportunity for us to reclaim our local rights, our traditions, our freedom to fish. And I would urge colleagues on both sides of the aisle to have a little common sense here. Support S 982. It's a very reasonable approach to trying to solve this problem, solving this dispute with the Corps. Support S 982. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I do rise today to support this legislation and to support the sportsmen from Tennessee and Kentucky. And as you can see, this is an issue where there is bipartisan agreement. One of my constituents said it so well. They're so frustrated with this situation, and we've heard from so many of them on it. And they said, you know, you can turn on the TV any night and you see government overreach, whether it's the IRS admitting that they have targeted conservative groups or DOJ wiretapping reporters, and then you get home to Tennessee and at the local level, what you see is the Corps of Engineers coming in and saying, well, by the way, we're going to change something, and you're not going to be able to fish. Fishing in Tennessee is a tradition. It is a favorite pastime. Sportsmen have been fishing along this beautiful Cumberland River for years. As Mr. Cooper said, it is a beautiful place to be. And since the dams were built, I have to tell you, there are now generations of Tennesseans. You will see families out together fishing, and we have about 900,000 registered anglers in our state. And I have to tell you, I think our office has heard from almost every one of them on this issue. They have been very persistent. And one thing I would want my colleagues to know is that our sportsmen in our state are wonderful stewards of conserving our natural resources and the great outdoors, and they exercise personal responsibility and great care in protecting their favorite place to go fishing. It is really to the disbelief of the Army Corps of Engineers that we already know when it is safe or not to go fish in these tailwaters. So what we are saying is, let's right this wrong, and let's allow individuals to get back and enjoy the Freedom to Fish Act. Pass it today.
Gentlewoman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really appreciate the information from my colleagues on the other side. It is only for 2 years, which is time enough to be able to have the Corps and the individual participants be able to come to some agreement. The fact that there is, according to my colleague, no fishing, I think it's only in certain areas, which would be at the lip of the dam and below the dam where the spill is, where there is danger of boats getting swamped. And so it is something that we need to look forward to and seeing what happens. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back the balance of her time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, spring is upon us, a season that is important to several of Kentucky's signature industries. Not only does spring signify horse racing and the Kentucky Derby, but it also marks the beginning of the adventure and outdoor tourism season as well. Tourism is an $11.7 billion signature industry in my state, employing over 166,000 Kentuckians and accounting for 1 in 10 jobs across the Commonwealth. A major part of Kentucky tourism stems from one of America's favorite pastimes, fishing. In my district, the Kentucky River is enjoyed by many, as it stretches from the Daniel Boone National Forest and meanders through horse farms in the central bluegrass, specifically in Woodford and Franklin counties. Fishermen especially enjoy fishing in the Kentucky River's tailwaters surrounding locks and dams, areas notorious for having an abundance of fish. Unfortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers has decided to prohibit tailwater fishing in a sister river just south of my district, the Cumberland River, where many of my constituents travel to engage in their favorite pastime. This is yet another example of government overreach, where this time the government is telling us how to fish in water systems that have been safely utilized for generations. We must not allow the Corps to set a precedent for regulating how Kentuckians and Americans alike spend their time outdoors. As our fragile economy continues to recover, my constituents tell me that they plan on sticking closer to home to recreate this spring and summer. Overregulation of fishing is a deterrent to family time and harms our local businesses that depend on the revenue from seasonal recreation and tourism. I ask my colleagues to join me in support of the Freedom to Fish Act, which places a 2-year moratorium on the Corps' plan to restrict access to tailwaters in the Cumberland River. This will allow us time to implement a permanent plan.
Give the gentleman 30 additional seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for another 30 seconds.
Thank you. This will allow us time to implement a permanent plan to halt the Army Corps from setting a precedent of restricting access to any tailwaters going forward. I'm an original co-sponsor of this legislation, and I applaud the leadership of Mr. Whitfield, my colleague from Kentucky, and that does exactly this: protect fishermen in rural economies and Americans' rights to choose how they recreate. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Now, for me to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Frog Jump, Tennessee, Mr. Fincher.
The gentleman from Frog Jump, Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding. I have had the privilege of fishing, actually, on the Cumberland River at Barkley Dam. And my grandfather took me many times to fish there. And how this would work and why it's such a good fishing spot is when they would release the water from the top of the dam, when it would come under and come in the back of the dam, the waters would roll up, and the big fish that we talk about would roll up off the bottom, and that's why the fishing is so good. And it's like we don't have enough things to do in Washington that we're dealing with this issue today. I want to thank Mr. Whitfield for bringing this up, but common sense solutions to problems are what we should be talking about. And the Corps, in many respects, they do good work, but bringing this up, stopping the fishing from occurring at the dams and on the rivers, the Cumberland River in specific, is ridiculous. We need to get down to the business of America. Let's let people fish where they've always fished, like my grandfather took me to Barkley Dam over and over and over, time and time again, and get to the real issues. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation today, and let's give the power back to the people. Common sense solutions for real problems. And with that, I yield back to the chairman.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, I take it our colleagues have no other speakers?
The gentlewoman from California has yielded the balance of her time.
Okay, and I'll close. Once again, I just want to applaud our leadership for bringing this legislation to the floor today. As I said earlier, this is an excellent opportunity, or an excellent example, for Congress to exercise our constitutional authority over these federal agencies. And with that, I would urge all of my colleagues to join in supporting this important legislation, S-982. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 982, S-982? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Purposes, the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and agree to Senate Concurrent Resolution 16.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for the unveiling of a statue of Frederick Douglass.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. Miller, and the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I would also ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the concurrent resolution.
Without objection, so ordered.
And, Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I might consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I rise in support today, Mr. Speaker, of Senate Concurrent Resolution 16, authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for the unveiling of a statue of Frederick Douglass, a great abolitionist. Frederick Douglass is a pivotal figure in American history who had an unyielding dedication to equal rights, the abolition of slavery, and the advancement of women's suffrage. His brave actions and compelling writings inspired and forever changed this grateful nation. Born into slavery, Frederick Douglass escaped to New York in 1838 disguised as a free, uniformed sailor. And upon achieving his own freedom, he quickly and unwaveringly turned his life's mission to seeking freedom, justice, and equality for all. Frederick Douglass inspired in African Americans the fundamental that one's achievement cannot be limited by one's color and that the American dream is within reach for all Americans, regardless of race. Over a century has passed since his death, and yet his contribution to American society is very much alive today. His tireless dedication, brilliant words, and inclusive vision of humanity continue to inspire people of all races. In considering the remarkable achievements of Frederick Douglass and his contributions to our rich history, his presence within the United States Capitol will honor this institution and serve as an endearing testimony to this nation's struggle for freedom and for equality. I want to thank the Senator from the State of New York, Mr. Schumer, for introducing this concurrent resolution, as well as my colleague, Ms. Norton, from the District of Columbia, for her work on this, and I would certainly urge my colleagues to support it. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Michigan reserves. The gentlewoman from the District of Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of Senate Concurrent Resolution 16. I would like to begin by thanking Chairman Miller for her help in bringing this resolution to the floor. I also thank the Ranking Member Brady for his long-standing commitment to placing a District of Columbia statute in the United States Capitol. When he chaired the committee approved my bill that would have given the district 2 statues in the Capitol, the usual practice under federal law. But we are pleased to have our first statute and are grateful to the House leadership for permitting this bill on the floor today. We especially thank Senators Schumer and Durbin for their help in getting this resolution, as well as the bill authorizing the placement of the Douglass statue in the Capitol passed in the Senate. The District of Columbia has no senators, so we are fortunate we have distinguished allies like Senators Schumer and Durbin. Like the residents of the 50 states, the residents of the District of Columbia have fought and died in all our nation's wars and have always paid federal income taxes. Unlike the residents of the 50 states, the District of Columbia residents are still fighting for their equal rights as American citizens. Since 2002, one component of that fight has been to achieve statues representing the District of Columbia placed in the Capitol, like the states, which fulfill every obligation of citizenship, as the district does. D.C. residents chose Douglass to represent them in the Capitol, not only because he is one of the great international icons of human and civil rights. For us, Douglass is especially important because he was not content to rest on his historic national achievements. He knew where he lived. and was deeply involved in the civic and political affairs of the District of Columbia. Douglas, a strong Republican, served as Recorder of Deeds of the District of Columbia, as United States Marshal here, as a member of the D.C. Council, its upper chamber then, and because the Republican Congress gave the district a home rule government, he was able to actually run for office in the local government at that time. Douglas was also a member of the Board of Trustees of Howard University for 24 years. Douglas made his home in the Anacostia neighborhood of southeast Washington, which is now the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, administered by the National Park Service. In choosing Douglas, it was important to our residents that Douglas also dedicated himself to securing self-government and voting rights for the residents of the District of Columbia. Many Americans may not know that D.C. residents have only rarely had even non-voting representation in the Congress or a local government, and even today has no vote on the floor of the House and no senators, although our residents pay federal income taxes like everybody else and fight in all the nation's wars like everybody else. The city had both home rule and a delegate for a brief period during Reconstruction, and then was without any home rule government or any representation in the Congress for over 100 years until the 1970s. In his autobiography, The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, Douglass commented on the unequal political status of his hometown, the District of Columbia, and of its residents. Most of what Douglass wrote in the 19th century holds true today, and I am quoting Douglass from his autobiography. These people are outside of the United States. They occupy neutral ground and have no political existence. They have neither voice nor vote in all the practical politics of the United States. They are hardly to be called citizens of the United States. Practically, they are aliens, not citizens, but subjects. The District of Columbia is the one spot where there is no government for the people, of the people, and by the people. Its citizens submit to rulers whom they have had no choice in selecting. They obey laws which they had no voice in making. They have a plenty of taxation, but no representation. In the great questions of politics in the country, they can march with neither army, but are relegated to the position of neuters. I have nothing to say in favor of this anomalous condition of the people of the District of Columbia, and hardly think that it ought to be or will be much longer. Well, Douglass did not mince his words. The Douglass statue in our Capitol will recognize the universality of his dedication to human rights and democratic rights. His statue in the Capitol will remind District of Columbia residents that they too will partake of these values one day. His statue will offer the same pride that other citizens of our country experience when they come to the Capitol and see memorials that commemorate the efforts of their residents and their significant contributions. And the Douglass statue offers other Americans the opportunity to see the residents of their nation's capital honored as well in their capital. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from District of Columbia reserves. The gentlewoman from Michigan.
Reserve.
The gentlewoman from Michigan reserves. The gentlewoman from District of Columbia.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from the District of Columbia yields the balance of her time. The gentlewoman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to thank my colleague from the District of Columbia for her very eloquent words. And we are all looking forward to the unveiling of this statue of this remarkable American that is such a critical component of our history, our proud history. And with that, I would urge all of my colleagues to support this Senate concurrent resolution. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Michigan yields the balance of her time. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and agree to Senate Concurrent Resolution 16? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
You want all? The gentleman from Florida seek recognition.
Regarding my desire to address H.R. 3 under my motion filed yesterday.
Does the gentleman call up his resolution?
Pardon me?
Does the gentleman call up his resolution?
Yes.
Clerk will report the resolution.
Resolved that the House of Representatives shall not consider H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, because 1, it violates Rule 21 of the House, and 2, it affects the dignity and integrity of the proceedings of the House since it is unconstitutional.
Does the gentleman from Florida wish to present argument on the parliamentary question whether the resolution presents a question of privileges of the House?
Yes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I rise today to address H.R. 3, the Northern Route Approval Act, and my resolution raising a question of privilege regarding the matter. Please note that this is a privileged motion and therefore outside the scope of the Rules Committee's jurisdiction regarding the order of business in the House under Rule 10. Rather, this is a question of privilege affecting the right of the House collectively, its safety and dignity, and the integrity of its proceedings pursuant to Rule 9. It is not invoked to effect a change in the rules or in their interpretation as prescribed by House Rules and Manuals at page 420. Consideration of this bill exceeds the rights of the House collectively and brings into question the dignity and integrity of the proceedings of the House of Representatives under House Rule 9 because, first, it is unconstitutional, and second, it is an earmark. I presented this matter to the full House in H.Res. 225 as a question of privilege last night, and I noticed the question immediately following the only vote series of the day. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 9 of the House, you must now make your determination as to whether or not this is an appropriate question of privilege and hold a vote on the resolution offered before the House. Before that happens, I'd like to address the two claims I've made against the bill offered by the gentleman from Nebraska, and then I will outline reasons why I feel you should find in favor of my question of privilege. H.R. 3 is unconstitutional. The Constitution does not permit Congress to execute the laws. The above is taken from the Supreme Court's ruling in Boucher v. Sinar. The bill before us violates this principle. Congress creates the laws, and it's up to the executive to execute the laws. Under Section 3 of this bill, however, the final environmental impact statement issued by the Secretary of State on August 26, 2011, and the presidential permit required for the pipeline prescribed in the application filed on May 4, 2012 by, yes?
The gentleman must confine his remarks to the question of privilege.
I believe I have. May I continue?
The gentleman shall not discuss the underlying bill, but to the matter of privilege.
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, I think they're inextricably entwined. I don't see how I can do one without the other. May I continue?
Gentleman may proceed.
The Trans-Canada Keystone Pipeline LP to the Department of State as supplemented to include the Nebraska reroute evaluating the final evaluation report issued by the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality in January 2013 and approved by the Nebraska governor shall be considered or deemed to satisfy all the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and the National Historic Preservation Act. This is a clear attempt by this body to execute the law of the land, and that is prescribed by the Constitution. Again, Mr. Speaker, the executive must execute the laws. H.R. 3 runs afoul of this requirement. The Supreme Court held in Bowser v. Sinar that interpreting a law enacted by Congress to implement the legislative mandate is the very essence of execution of the law, and that's exactly what's being proposed here and forbidden by the Constitution. The exercise of judgment in the bill before us concerning facts that affect the application of the statute.
Gentleman's remarks should be refined to the question of privileges of the House. The gentleman's remarks are going to the underlying bill, which are not a question before the House currently.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I just said,
if the gentleman is unwilling to refer to the question of privilege, the chair is prepared to rule.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not a question of whether I'm willing to. As I indicated before, the two are inextricably linked.
The chair would remind the gentleman that there are two different questions. One is the question that you're trying to propose in your motion. The other one is the question of privilege. We are here debating the question of privilege, whether this resolution constitutes a question of privilege.
I understand that, but I don't think that the chair can properly be informed of that question without the material that I'm providing to the chair right now.
Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. The Supreme Court held in Bowser v. Sinar that interpreting a law enacted by Congress to implement the legislative mandate is the very essence of execution of the law, and that's exactly what is being proposed here. The exercise of judgment in the bill before us concerning facts that affect application of statute constitutes execution of the law. It is an unconstitutional act that this body should not entertain. It violates separation of powers and violates the principle underlying the prohibition of bills of attainder. Statements are deemed in this bill to be in compliance with laws the executive has been tasked with executing, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, known as NEPA, and the National Historical Preservation Act. If you see Section 3 of H.R. 3, it's referenced there. This is an impermissible execution of the law. Congress, through this bill, is attempting to apply the facts of the Keystone XL Pipeline environmental statement to the body of law and deciding that they comply. This is unconstitutional and brings into question the dignity and integrity of the proceedings of the House.
The chair will give the gentleman one more opportunity. The question of constitutionality is not a question of privileges of the House. The gentleman should refer to the question of privileges of the House, and if the gentleman is unprepared to do so, the chair is prepared to rule.
Mr. Chair, the last words that I just said were that this offends the dignity and integrity of the proceedings of the House. This relates directly to the matter before the chair. May I proceed?
May proceed on the question of privilege. And I believe the gentleman knows the difference.
Mr. Chair, I stand by what I just said. May I proceed?
Proceed. The chair is prepared to rule if the gentleman strays off the course of question of privilege.
Again, Mr. Chair, I don't believe you can properly do that without being fully informed as to the facts here. May I proceed?
Proceed.
Apparently, we're no longer satisfied with writing the laws. We have now taken it upon ourselves to execute them as well. This discredits the institution not only within the federal government, complicating our constitutional relationship with both the executive and the judicial branches, but also in the eyes of the American people. We must not allow the House to be degraded this way. Even when the facts of the bill are examined, the measure fails. The bill states that the environmental impact statement satisfies NEPA. That environmental impact statement, however, was for a different project, the Keystone XL pipeline as proposed in 2009, a pipeline that would have terminated in the Gulf Coast. The NEPA process.
The chair has heard sufficient arguments. The arguments that the gentleman is making are proper arguments from the merits of the proposed legislation. but not on the question of privilege. The Chair is prepared to rule. The gentleman from Florida seeks to offer his resolution as a question of the privileges of the House under Rule 9. The resolution proposes a special order of business with regard to a specified legislative measure. Specifically, it mandates that a measure not be considered by the House because it is unconstitutional and violates a rule of the House. To qualify as a question of privilege, a resolution must affect the rights of the House collectively, its safety, dignity, or the integrity of its proceedings. In evaluating the resolution under the standards of Rule 9, the Chair is guided by a fundamental principle illuminated by annotations of precedent in Section 706 of the House Rules and Manual, to wit, that a question of the privileges of the House may not be invoked to effect a change in the rules or standing orders of the House or their interpretation, nor to prescribe a special order of business for the House. The averment that this resolution presents a question of the privileges of the House under Rule 9 embodies precisely the contrary principle, under which each individual member of the House would constitute a virtual Rules Committee able to place before the House at any time whatever proposed order of business he or she might deem advisable based on allegations of unconstitutionality or violations of the rules. In such an environment, anything could be privileged, so nothing would enjoy the true privilege. Accordingly, under the long and well-established line of precedent as elucidated most recently by the ruling of August 10, 2010, the Chair finds that such a resolution does not affect the rights of the House collectively, its safety, dignity, or the integrity of its proceedings within the meaning of Clause 1 of Rule 9, and therefore does not qualify as a question of privileges of the House.
I respectfully disagree with the ruling of the Chair.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on motions to suspend the rules previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: H.R. 1412 by the ayes and nays, H.R. 324 by the ayes and nays, H.R. 1344 by the ayes and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion from the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Miller, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1412 as amended, on which the ayes and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 39, H.R. 1412, a bill to improve and increase the availability of on-job training and apprenticeship programs carried out by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes.
Question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
A series of 3 votes here on the House floor dealing with veterans issues. 15-minute vote here, Improving Job Opportunities for Veterans Act of 2013. This is a 15-minute. The next 2 will be 5-minute votes. Just heard Alan Grayson of Florida addressing an issue of questions of privileges of the House on the legislation that's expected on the House floor later this week, H.R. 3. The Northern Route Approval Act. This is a bill that would allow construction of the northern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline. The Hill wrote earlier this week, actually late last week, that the bill says no presidential permit is needed to begin construction of the Northern Route. This is a bill offered by Lee Terry of Nebraska. And the Hill says that in March, when he introduced the bill, the administration said the administration has had plenty of time to assess the entire project and approve it. Again, that bill not expected till later this week. That was a question of privilege on the bill and a ruling from the chair. In this 15-minute vote, we're going to bring you comments from President Obama on the Oklahoma tornadoes. They've had a news conference out there earlier with the Governor, Mary Fallon, and you can see that on our website, cspan.org. The death toll from the tornadoes so far, 24. And following this vote in the House, we also expect a moment of silence from members in the U.S. House. But here's the President from earlier today. Well, we apologize about that. Obviously, no audio. We will try to show that to you later on in votes here in the U.S. House. Again, the first of 3 votes on the floor dealing with veterans issues. We expect this to be the one and only series of votes in the House today. Meanwhile, the Senate continues debate on the Farm Bill that you can follow on C-SPAN 2, the 5-year reauthorization of farm and nutrition programs. And again, that's on C-SPAN 2. We covered a number of hearings on the Senate side today, including looking at the IRS targeting of conservative groups and the hearing looking at the corporate tax policies of Apple, and all of those available in our video library at cspan.org. We'll show you all of those, too, later in our program schedule. On the floor of the House, a bill that would improve job opportunities for veterans, one of several bills they debated today dealing with veterans. 3 votes here. This first vote, 15 minutes, and 2 5-minute votes will follow that. We on C-SPAN covered a number of congressional hearings today, mainly on the Senate side, including the Senate Finance Committee and their hearing looking at the IRS targeting of certain conservative groups. During part of the hearing today, Senator Baucus spoke with the outgoing acting director, Stephen Miller, and the former commissioner, Douglas Shulman, about the employees in Cincinnati who were allegedly targeting some of the conservative groups. Here's a look. Having some technical issues with the video. We apologize. Again, you can see all of it in our video library. Hopefully we can get a chance to show that to you during this vote. The House is voting on a veterans jobs bill. 2 more votes after this. We expect between the end of this vote and the beginning of the next vote that the House will take a moment of silence for victims of the Oklahoma tornado yesterday. The Associated Press reporting that authorities there aren't sure how many people are still missing in the aftermath. Officials initially reported as many as 51 dead, but they've revised that toll downward to 24. White House spokesman Jay Carney said that the Homeland Security Secretary, Janet Napolitano, will be in Oklahoma City tomorrow. President Obama was joined by the Homeland Security Secretary and others at his briefing earlier today.
Good morning, everybody. As we all know by now, a series of storms swept across the plains yesterday, and one of the most destructive tornadoes in history sliced through the towns of Newcastle and Moore, Oklahoma. In an instant, neighborhoods were destroyed. Dozens of people lost their lives. Many more were injured, and among the victims were young children trying to take shelter in the safest place they knew, their school. So our prayers are with the people of Oklahoma today. Our gratitude is with the teachers who gave their all to shield their children, with the neighbors, first responders, and emergency personnel who raced to help as soon as the tornado passed, and with all of those who, as darkness fell, searched for survivors through the night. As a nation, our full focus right now is on the urgent work of rescue and the hard work of recovery and rebuilding that lies ahead. Yesterday, I spoke with Governor Fallin to make it clear to Oklahomans that they would have all the resources that they need at their disposal. Last night, I issued a disaster declaration to expedite those resources, to support the governor's team in the immediate response and to offer direct assistance to folks who have suffered loss. I also just spoke with Mayor Lewis of Moore, Oklahoma, to ensure that he's getting everything that he needs. I've met with Secretary of Napolitano this morning and my Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor, Lisa Monaco, to underscore that point, that Oklahoma needs to get everything that it needs right away. The FEMA Administrator, Craig Fugate, is on his way to Oklahoma as we speak. FEMA staff was first deployed to Oklahoma's Emergency Operations Center on Sunday as the state already was facing down the first wave of deadly tornadoes. Yesterday, FEMA activated urban search and rescue teams from Texas, Nebraska, and Tennessee to assist in the ongoing search and rescue efforts, and a mobile response unit to boost communications and logistical support. So the people of Moore should know that their country will remain on the ground, there for them, beside them, as long as it takes. For there are homes and schools to rebuild, businesses and hospitals to reopen, their parents to console, first responders to comfort, and, of course, frightened children who will need our continued love and attention. There are empty spaces where there used to be living rooms and bedrooms and classrooms, and in time we're going to need to refill those spaces with love and laughter and community. We don't yet know the full extent of the damage from this week's storm. We don't know both the human and economic losses that may have occurred. We know that severe rumbling of weather, bad weather, through much of the country still continues, and we're also preparing for a hurricane season that begins next week. But if there is hope to hold on to, not just in Oklahoma but around the country, it's the knowledge that the good people there and in Oklahoma are better prepared for this type of storm than most, and what they can be certain of is that Americans from every corner of this country will be right there with them, opening our homes, our hearts to those in need, because we're a nation that stands with our fellow citizens as long as it takes. We've seen that spirit in Joplin and Tuscaloosa. We saw that spirit in Boston and Breezy Point. And that's what the people of Oklahoma are going to need from us right now. For those of you who want to help, you can go online right now to the American Red Cross, which is already on the ground in Moore. Already we've seen the University of Oklahoma announce that it will provide housing for displaced families. We've seen local churches and companies open their doors and their wallets. And last night, the people of Joplin dispatched a team to help the people of Moore. So for all those who've been affected, we recognize that you face a long road ahead. In some cases, there will be enormous grief that has to be absorbed, but you will not travel that path alone. Your country will travel it with you, fueled by our faith in the Almighty and our faith in one another. So our prayers are with the people of Oklahoma today, and we will back up those prayers with deeds for as long as it takes. Thank you very much.
Just to let you know, we also covered today the news conference with Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin and Craig Fugate, the FEMA director, and others. That's on our website, cspan.org. Secretary Napolitano headed to Oklahoma City tomorrow. The House in the first of 3 votes. This one's 15 minutes. 2 5-minute votes will follow. A number of congressional hearings happening on Capitol Hill today, including the Senate Finance and their hearing looking at the IRS targeting of certain conservative groups. During the questioning, Senator Baucus asked questions of the outgoing acting commissioner, Stephen Miller, and the former commissioner, IRS Commissioner Douglas Shulman, about the IRS employees in Cincinnati who were allegedly targeting conservative groups, and asked why they weren't fired. Here's what he had to say.
A couple of questions. First, Mr. Miller and Mr. Shulman. Essentially, it's my understanding that the IRS headquarters shut down the use of political terms such as Tea Party and other terms we've all learned about in June of 2011. That's when headquarters shut that down. Why weren't people then fired or transferred? More significant action taken than just told, don't do this, given how outrageous this conduct is. Why wasn't more definitive action taken?
It's on. Sorry. I don't believe that I was aware at the time that had happened. I first became aware of this in May of 2012.
Mr. Shulman, you were around during this time?
Yeah, in June of 2011, I don't believe I was aware of this. Actually,
well, who was aware? Somebody at headquarters was aware, obviously, but besides Lois Lerner.
Well, the report indicates that exempt organizations knew. There's no indication, I think, from the report, and you'd have to ask the Inspector General that others knew at this time.
Well, sorry. Well, you're acting, head of the IRS. You were the head of IRS, but show me, well, who did know? I mean, come on, you've read the report. You were acting commissioner. You were commissioner. Come on. If you don't know, it sounds like somebody's not doing his job. So why wasn't more direct action taken? First, when these terms were discovered right away, and then had a second chance. IRS had a second chance after the same activity started again in January 2012. Incredibly, started again. IRS stopped for a while, then went back again. Old habits. I can't believe that, frankly. Why wasn't more firm action taken by people, either the commissioner himself or by people at the top? It's outrageous. Any person can figure out that this is unacceptable conduct. Mr. Miller?
Again, sir, all I can say is we were unaware. I was unaware, I believe, at the time that it had happened. When I found out in May, I took action.
But what action did you take?
So I was briefed on, after sending a group to take a look at the cases in May, they reported back to me in May of 2012, essentially which much of what had transpired and what is shown in the IG report, that the cases were languishing, that a list had been utilized, that letters had gone out that were much more broad than they should be. At that point, we had already taken care of the letters because those had come up, and this is how we knew something was going on, and I asked for a review. We then trained our folks. We held workshops to ensure that they were going to do the work well. We took a look at the cases. I asked for the cases to be looked at and grouped in a fashion that those that looked like they should be approved were approved. Those that looked like they needed some work got that work, and those that needed further development got that development. So we took action on that. I also, at that time, I was aware that TIGTA was working on this, but I took some intermediate action pending TIGTA. We transferred and reassigned an individual who had been involved in the letters, and I asked that the person who I believed at the time was responsible for the listing, that oral counseling occur. At that time, the listing process had
All right, I appreciate that, and this committee has sent many questions to you and Mr. Schulman and others to try to get the answer to some of these questions, and we're not going to get the definitive answers at this moment. That's clear. A deeper question to me is, how did this culture, what created this culture of indifference to the American people and of such aggressive behavior, so improperly targeting certain groups? What caused that culture to develop? And what did you do about correcting that culture, if even we're aware of it? Either one of you, Mr. Miller or Mr. Schulman. I'll start with you, Mr. Schulman.
Sure. During my time at the IRS, I believed and I articulated that the IRS needed to be a non-political, non-partisan
We may have articulated
agency.
that, but how did this happen?
I think that there's a set of rules built in to the system. There's laws, there's education of people that I think the vast majority of the IRS employees understand that and
What
abide
happened
with
in
that.
Cincinnati? What conditions caused that? Because my time's expiring here. It already has expired, frankly. If you could just very quickly, in a nutshell, bottom line, how did this happen?
Mr. Chairman, I can't say that I know that answer.
Well, you're a
I'm
commissioner.
6 months out of...
You got some sense of the outfit. You're a commissioner for a good number of years. You got some idea. You've thought about this.
I'm 6 months out of office. When I left, the IG was looking into this to gather all of the facts. I've now had the benefit of reading the report, and that's, the full accounting of facts that I have at this point. And so I don't think I can answer that question.
Well, I'm kind of disappointed, frankly, because you've had time to think about this, and you certainly have more thoughts than that. Senator Hatch.
All of that Senate hearing later in our program schedule. It's also on our website, cspan.org. The issue of IRS targeting of certain conservative groups may come up in the form of an amendment to, or amendments to the Farm Bill. Lawmakers are considering the 5-year reauthorization. Debate continues. You can follow that on C-SPAN 2. Here in the House, the first and only series of recorded votes of the day. Winding down this 15-minute vote, a Veterans Jobs Bill. 2 more 5-minute votes will follow, but before that, we expect a moment of silence for the victims of the tornadoes yesterday in Oklahoma City.
On this vote, the yeas are 416, the nays are 0. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion from the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Cotton, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 324 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 324, a bill to grant the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the 1st Special Service Force in recognition of its superior service during World War II.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
A bill that would authorize the granting of the Congressional Gold Medal to the 1st Special Service Force in recognition of their service during World War II. One more 5-minute vote will follow this, and that will do it for recorded votes this afternoon in the House. Later this week, the House will vote on bills allowing construction of the northern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline, also one tying interest rates on federal student loans to the 10-year Treasury note.
On this vote, the yeas are 415, the nays are 0. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is on the vote on the motion from the gentlewoman from Indiana, Ms. Brooks, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1344 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1344, a bill to amend Title 49 United States Code to direct the Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security, Transportation Security Administration, to provide expedited air passenger screening to severely injured or disabled members of the armed forces and severely injured or disabled veterans, and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.